For most of my life, I believed my family was unbreakable. Not perfect, but stable. Like a well-designed structure, it had flaws, sure, but its foundation felt solid. My name is Georgia, I'm 34. And for years I thought I understood exactly how my family worked. I was wrong. My father, Richard, was the cornerstone of our household. Quiet, disciplined, and principled. He was a civil engineer who believed in doing things the right way, even when no one was watching. My mother had been the warmth that softened his edges, filling our home with laughter and comfort until a sudden illness took her from us 10 years ago. After that, it was just the three of us. Dad, my younger brother Ethan, and me. I assumed loss would bring us closer. Instead, it exposed cracks I hadn't wanted to see. I've always been the responsible one. I followed in my father's footsteps and became an architect. Someone who plans ahead, who builds things meant to last. My dad and I shared that mindset. We understood each other without needing many words. Logic, preparation, legacy. Those were our shared values. Ethan was the opposite. 3 years younger than me. He had charm where I had caution, impulse where I had patience. He was magnetic, quick with excuses, and dangerously good at talking his way out of trouble. Growing up, whenever something went wrong, Ethan somehow walked away clean, and I was usually the one left cleaning up the damage. One incident still stands out. When Ethan was 20, he borrowed my father's prized vintage sedan for a night out. At 2 a.m. the phone rang. A police officer informed us Ethan had wrapped the car around a telephone pole. Thankfully, he wasn't seriously hurt, but the car was destroyed. When I arrived at the scene, my father stood silently, staring at the twisted metal. Ethan, meanwhile, was complaining about the road conditions and insisting it wasn't his fault. Not once did he apologize. "It's just a car," he snapped later at home. "We have insurance. What's the big deal?" The big deal was watching my father grieve something he'd rebuilt with his own hands. I spent the next 2 days handling the insurance paperwork and sitting with Dad in his garage as he talked through every detail of the car he'd loved. Ethan slept until noon and disappeared with his friends. That pattern never changed. Years later, the mess became financial. Ethan approached Dad with what he claimed was a once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity, a tech startup that was guaranteed to succeed. He needed $50,000 to get it off the ground. I reviewed the proposal, and it was obvious it was all flash and no substance. I warned Dad gently. The numbers didn't work. The risks were enormous. Ethan overheard me. "You just want me to fail," he snapped. "You like being the perfect one." Dad was torn. In the end, hope won over logic. He gave Ethan the money. 6 months later, the startup collapsed. The money vanished. Ethan blamed a partner and never apologized. Dad never spoke about it again, but I knew it had pushed his retirement back years. After that, Ethan drifted in and out of our lives. He called when he needed something, vanished when he didn't. I became the default caretaker. I hosted holidays, planned birthdays, and made sure Dad was never alone. My partner Mark, a lawyer, saw the pattern clearly. "He takes both you and your father for granted," he said once quietly. I defended Ethan. "He's my brother. That's just how he is." I thought I understood our family's structure completely, until the day my father called and asked me to come with him to the doctor. That phone call marked the moment everything began to collapse. I believed the diagnosis would bring us together, but instead it opened the door for something far darker. And when Ethan finally came home, I thought it was a miracle. Not the beginning of a calculated betrayal. The doctor's office smelled like disinfectant and quiet dread. The walls were beige, the lighting too bright, and the silence felt heavier than any words. When the oncologist finally spoke, his voice was calm and practiced, but every sentence landed like a blow. Stage 4 lung cancer. Inoperable. Palliative care only. A year. Maybe a little more if treatment slowed things down. I held my father's hand while the doctor explained chemotherapy schedules and pain management options. My grip was tight, as if letting go might make everything real. Dad stared at the wall, his shoulders slumped, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. I slipped into survival mode. I asked questions, took notes, made plans, because if I stopped moving, I knew I'd fall apart. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. When we reached his driveway, Dad finally turned to me. His voice barely above a whisper. "Don't tell Ethan yet." I hesitated. "Dad, he should know." "Please," he said. "Not yet. I don't want to worry him." I honored his request. For one agonizing week. I called him multiple times a day, visited every evening after work, brought food he barely touched, and sat beside him talking about anything except the shadow now looming over us. Finally, with his permission, I called Ethan. It went straight to voicemail. When he called back 2 hours later, he sounded distracted, like I'd interrupted something important. I told him the truth, plain and unfiltered. Dad has terminal cancer. There was a pause. Then, "Wow, that's rough. How long does he have?" "A year. Maybe more. He needs us." Yeah, of course," Ethan said. "Listen, I'm in the middle of something big right now. I'll try to come out in a few weeks. Send him my love." That was it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of hospital visits, pharmacy runs, and paperwork. I arranged home health care. Mark researched legal documents, healthcare proxies, powers of attorney, and held me together when I finally broke down at night. Ethan sent one text. "Thinking of you guys. Hang in there." Then, one Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Ethan, but his tone was completely different. "I've been thinking," he said. His voice unusually emotional. "This whole thing with Dad. It's a wake-up call. I've been a terrible son. I'm done running." I didn't speak. Barely breathed. "I'm dropping everything," he continued. "The deal fell through. Nothing matters more than family. I'm coming home. I want to be there for Dad." Hope is dangerous when you're desperate. For the first time in years, I let myself believe him. "Are you serious?" I asked. "I've never been more serious," he replied. "I'll be there in 2 days." When I told Mark, he tried to sound supportive, but I saw the caution in his eyes. "People can change," he said carefully. "Let's just see." 2 days later, Ethan's beat-up car pulled into Dad's driveway. He didn't even acknowledge me at first. He walked straight to Dad, dropped to his knees, and wrapped his arms around him, sobbing openly. "I'm so sorry," he cried. "I'm here now. I'm not leaving." Dad cried too. So did I. For the first few weeks, it felt like a miracle. Ethan moved into his old bedroom and took charge, learning medication schedules, cooking meals, sitting with Dad for hours. He listened to old stories, played classic movies, laughed at Dad's jokes. The house felt warmer, lighter. Dad seemed better. Not healthier, but happier. "He's really changed," Dad told me one afternoon, wonder in his voice. "I got my boy back." Praised Ethan. Thanked him. I felt relieved, like the crushing weight I'd been carrying alone had finally lifted. But slowly, quietly, something shifted. The first crack was small. I spent a Sunday preparing low-sodium meals for Dad, carefully labeling each container. Ethan thanked me and put them in the fridge. That evening, he pulled out a pizza menu. "Dad deserves a treat," he said lightly. "George's meals are healthy, but a little boring, right?" He laughed. Dad smiled. I swallowed my irritation. Then came the comments. When I arrived late one night after a major work presentation, Ethan greeted me with a grin. "There she is," he announced. "We weren't sure you'd make it." Later he pulled me aside. "He waits for you all day," Ethan said softly. "I tell him you're busy, but he takes it personally." It wasn't true. I was there every day. But the seed had been planted. And I didn't yet realize how poisonous it would become. First, I thought Ethan was helping. I didn't see that he was quietly rewriting my role in my father's mind, turning my devotion into absence, and himself into a hero. And soon, I would realize I was being erased. Manipulation doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It seeps in, slow, subtle, and patient, until the damage is done and no one remembers what things used to look like before. At first, I thought I was imagining the distance growing between my father and me. Grief plays tricks on the mind, after all. I told myself he was tired, that the chemotherapy fog was stealing his energy, not his affection. But the truth revealed itself in small moments. When I visited, Ethan hovered. He answered questions meant for Dad. He interrupted conversations with jokes or stories that shifted the focus back to himself. If I tried to sit alone with my father, Ethan would suddenly remember it was time for medication or repositioning. I felt like a visitor in my own childhood home. One afternoon, Mark and I sat down with Dad to discuss paperwork, medical directives, powers of attorney, necessary conversations, responsible ones. Ethan sat silently through it, arms crossed, his expression tight. The moment we finished, he pulled us into the hallway. "Do you have to be so morbid?" he whispered sharply. "You're stressing him out. It's like you're already planning his funeral." "That's not fair," I said. "This is about protecting him. Or protecting yourselves," Ethan snapped. "Why can't you just enjoy the time he has left?" He framed responsibility as cruelty, planning as greed. And it worked. Dad became quieter with me. Our conversations lost their ease. He looked at me differently, like he was trying to reconcile two versions of me and didn't know which was real. The house no longer felt safe. Ethan controlled everything. He answered the phone, filtered visitors, decided when Dad was too tired to talk. Slowly, methodically, I was pushed to the edges. Then came the moment that shattered me. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Gray sky, heavy air. Ethan had stepped out to run errands, leaving me alone with Dad. He was unusually alert that day, eyes clear, mind focused. I took his hand, grateful for the rare clarity. We talked about work, about a new project, about anything normal. Then he squeezed my hand weakly. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" I asked. He looked at me with a sadness so deep it nearly broke me. "I just wish you'd made more time," he said quietly. "You've been so busy." My chest tightened. "I've been here, Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "Every day." He shook his head faintly. "Ethan gave up everything," he continued. "He really stepped up when it mattered. I see that now." The words landed like a physical blow. Every visit, every meal, every late-night call with nurses. Erased. "Dad, that's not true," I whispered through tears. "It's okay," he said, turning away. "I'm just tired." That was the last real conversation we ever had. 2 weeks later, he passed away peacefully in his sleep. Ethan found him. Ethan made the call. The funeral was a blur. Black clothes, murmured condolences, casseroles from neighbors. I moved through it numb, hollowed out by grief and guilt and rage I couldn't yet name. Ethan played his role perfectly, the devoted son, shattered but dignified. People praised him openly. "You're so lucky he was there," one woman told me. A week later, we sat in a lawyer's office I didn't recognize. That should have been my first warning. The lawyer read through the will. I barely listened until my name came up. "To my daughter Georgia," he read. "In light of her distance and lack of support during my final months, I leave the sum of $10,000, with the hope that she reflects on the importance of family." I couldn't breathe. Distance, lack of support. The rest, everything else, went to Ethan. I looked across the table at my brother. His head was bowed, his hand covering his face. But for just a split second before he hit it, I saw it. Triumph. He had rewritten history and made it permanent. Grief turned to ice in my veins. This wasn't my father's voice. This was Ethan's. I thought the will was the end of the story. I was wrong. Because buried in my father's belongings was something Ethan never accounted for. Something that would expose every lie and change everything. The days after the will was read passed in a thick, suffocating haze. Barely slept, barely ate. The check for $10,000 arrived in the mail, and I left it untouched on the kitchen counter, face down like something poisonous. Ethan called repeatedly. Voicemails filled with practiced sorrow. "I had no idea Dad would do that," he said in one message. You know how confused he was at the end. "We can fix this. We're family." Mark listened to one of them beside me, his jaw tightening. "Don't respond," he said firmly. "He's testing you. He wants to see if you'll accept scraps and disappear." So I blocked Ethan's number. A month later, Mark and I returned to Dad's house to collect personal belongings. Ethan left the key under the mat, too much of a coward to face me. The house felt frozen in time. His scent lingered. His reading glasses sat on the nightstand. Every room was heavy with memory. We worked quietly, sorting through drawers and